Let's get more reaction now on the newly published National State Enterprises Bill that proposes an overhaul of how state-owned entities are governed. Suggestions include, among others, the creation of a new state-owned holding company which would manage SOEs and their finances. In other words, the current model, where the Public Enterprises Department has political and legislative control of entities such as Eskom and Transnet, would cease to exist. Redge Nkosi is Executive Director and Head of Research at First Source Money and joins us live. Redge, appreciate your time this evening. Just unpack for us, will you, what is the National State Enterprises Bill and why is it significant at this point in time?
Yeah, thanks for having me. Firstly, the bill seeks to transfer the key SOEs, state-owned enterprises, into one government entity which is going to manage all these SOEs that are so strategic to the economy. In other words, so the GPE will obviously cease to exist, and all these other entities, wherever they were reporting, will be reporting to this new government entity owned ostensibly 100% by the state itself.
Now, you speak of key SOEs, and I think when they did the number of SOEs, obviously we talk about the major ones, Transnet, Eskom, and so on. But there are hundreds of SOEs, is that correct? And what happens to them if we're only talking about the key ones?
We don't understand that all of these 715 or 700 plus 700 SOEs will be transferred to this particular entity. We think the major ones. The other ones will perhaps remain where they are. And, yeah, that will continue. I think the whole idea is to ensure that this particular new company becomes a wealth management company, an investment management company that the government has to use for it to commercially gain from its investment. Instead of using this particular institution as a strategic investor in the economy, it simply becomes a commercial entity for maximization of profits. That's all.
Now, one of the key issues obviously has been political interference with the current state of the SOEs. How will this new structure manage political interference?
It's very much unlikely to be different because all the appointees are going to be state appointees, and the political head is going to be the minister, and that minister will appoint the board and so on. The board will obviously manage, just like Eskom now is being managed by an independent board. So there's not going to be significant differences at all. The only difference here, according to them, is that, well, this new entity is going to, to be very focused and therefore to be able to generate profits. But actually, it is a model that's not going to work in this country because it is copied on the Singapore system, the Temasek model of the Singapore government. And that model is, quite frankly, not fit for South Africa. It's just surprising that South Africa has taken this route. But, by the way, not necessarily surprising to some of us who have been following it, because it has actually the World Bank that recommended that this model is good enough for South Africa. Unfortunately, it won't be very good at all going into the future.
So, in your take, what would the alternative be if this is not the solution to the current problems that we have with the SOEs, but we do agree that there needs to be a plan to sort them out? What is that alternative?
Perhaps if we go back to what Singapore had done, Singapore moved to this particular model when they had achieved full employment. They were an industrialized country. Singapore had reached GDP greater than the US. So there was no need for Singapore to be involved in the developmental activities that SOEs like Transnet and Eskom are involved in. So before that, then, Temasek was actually not in existence. So Ministry of Trade and Industry of Singapore was in charge of these SOEs and the Ministry of Finance there. So the best way forward for South Africa is that these institutions like Transnet should actually go to the line departments, not be separated and become commercial entities. Here we are subordinating actually developmental objectives to commercial interests. Now the word commercial interest, as it appears in the bill, essentially means maximization of profit, and they will have nothing to do with the developmental activities supporting perhaps the poor as we see now, ESCOM does support the poor, Transnet sometimes that get involved in that. So yeah, it's going to be quite difficult, but I think transferring these entities to the line departments, ESCOM goes to energy, Transnet goes to transport as before, that should have been the way forward, not the one that government has planned today.
Redge Nkosi is Executive Director and Head of Research at First Source Money.